15th, 2020, and it's 6 p.m. and we welcome you to tonight's forum. This is I'm Abner Perney, immediate past president of the Salina Area League of Women Voters. Today's forum is sponsored by the Salina League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization of women and men of every age, race, background, and political belief. Through more than 1,200 leagues, state leagues, these are local leagues, state leagues, and the national organization, league members work to promote citizen action on local, state, and national issues, and to register and vote. The league is an organization, does not support any particular candidates. Our goal for today's forum is to provide the Salina area voters with information about the candidates in the contested races on the ballots for the primary election coming right up on August 4th. Voters may vote by mail or vote in advance at the office of the county clerk, which is room 215 in the city county building at 300 West Ash. I know that there was advance mailing to everyone for the application to vote by written ballot in advance. So if you have that and want to use it, it's already in your possession. If you still need it, it's readily available from the county clerk in the city county building. We thank the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce for the use of this Visit Salina Annex building. We also thank Salina Media Connection and Smoky Hills Public Broadcasting for being here to video this event. Today's forum will begin with our candidates for the Saline County Attorney. Following that, we'll have candidates for the Saline County Commission District Number 3, the Kansas House of Representatives District 69 and District 71, and then the Kansas Senate District 24. All the candidates in these contests were invited to participate. However, some of the candidates will not be here tonight due to other conflicts. Some of the candidates also answered a written questionnaire from the League of Women Voters. Those are posted on our league website, www.lwvsalina.org. Okay, so our first segment is going to feature the Republican candidates for the Saline County Attorney. They are here to my right, Jeff Ebel and Brock Abbey. Ann Zimmerman's going to conduct this first session and ask the questions, and here is Ann Zimmerman, our Vice President.
Thank you. My job right now is to go over the rules. We will start this session and every session with 1 minute opening remarks by the candidates. We will alternate the order of the candidates answering questions, and we will start with questions from the media panel. Then we will take questions from the audience. We hope that you can see the email and cell phone number to text. Send us your questions, and our members will be transcribing them and bringing them up to us so that we can ask those questions to the candidates after the initial questions from the media panel. Questions must pertain to all candidates, and candidates will have 1 minute to answer each question. Then we will have 1 minute closing remarks by the candidates, and we will then take a break for the next group. So to start out with, we're starting in alphabetical order. So Brock, Abbey, you have 1 minute for an opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you first, Abner and Ms. Zimmerman, for hosting this. This is obviously one of the only public events where people are going to be able to see the candidates. I want to spend my opening with giving everyone a little bit of a background about me. Starting with, I got my bachelor's degree from the University of Nebraska at Kearney, and then right after that went to Washburn University School of Law. While I was there, I did an externship with a federal judge. I worked for a federal judge one summer. That was based on a merit selection process, and I also, during that summer, got a student license. So when I was done clerking for Eric Melgren as the federal judge, I immediately went in and began as a prosecutor working for the Sherman County Attorney out in Goodland, prosecuting cases when I could from law school, A lot of it ended up being writing and drafting briefs and that sort of thing. I graduated Washburn 15 out of 142 people in my class, and while waiting for the bar exam to take place and after the bar exam waiting for the results, I went back out to Goodland and began working.
Stop. Thank you. The next opening remark is from Jeff Ebel.
Hi, my name is Jeff Ebel, and I'm asking for your vote on August the 4th to be your next Saline County attorney. I've been a Saline County resident for over 31 years. This is where I went to school, it's where I've got married, it's where I've worked my whole life, it's where I'm raising my kids, it's where we go to church, it's where we volunteer with our time. This is truly my home. So why do I want to be your next Saline County attorney? For me, the answer is very simple. I want to give back and serve my fellow citizens. I have previously served my community by being a corrections officer, a police officer with the Salina Police Department. I worked at the Saline County Attorney's Office as a prosecutor myself for over 8.5 years. For the last 7 years, I've been working as a defense attorney with my own firm here in town. I believe with this knowledge, education, and experience, I am the best candidate to be your next Saline County attorney going forward. Thank you.
Okay, we have a media panel of two gentlemen, Aaron Anders from the Salina Journal and Paul Kirkwood from Salina Media Connection. We had a third invited from KSAL and Rockingham, and they are not available tonight. Okay, so you get to each take, we'll alternate back and forth. Aaron, you're up first because of our alphabetical order to ask a question, and each candidate gets a minute or 2 minutes? Minute to respond.
Okay, well, first off, I would just like to thank all of the candidates for being here, and thank you for running for your respective offices. Thank you for caring enough to help improve Saline County, our surrounding counties, and the state of Kansas. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to address these various issues and answering these questions with respect and honesty. My first question is, this past month we have seen tensions over police brutality, removal of historic statues, the change of names of professional sports teams, and general race tensions have mounted more than ever. How can we work together to foster and improve race relations and fairness for all Americans?
And Brock should begin.
I like the idea that some of which is already going on.
Yeah, wait, I think it should be Jeff, because Brock began the opening statement.
Oh, well, these are the questions. Okay. All right, well, I'm sorry that we're confused on our procedure. If Mr. Ebel, Jeff would begin at this time. We're supposed to alternate back and forth between you.
Sure. To me, the biggest thing, honestly, is to have an open and honest dialogue with all the parties involved. I believe that the county attorney's office, while one doesn't necessarily set policy per se, we're not the ones passing the law, we're the ones charged with enforcing the law. But I still believe that there should be honest communication and dialogue between all the parties involved. I believe if there's a specific issue going on in our community, that those community leaders need to approach the county attorney's office, that the sheriff and the police department, we all need to get together in a room and sit down and talk about those issues to see what can and cannot happen. Obviously, such things as desecration of public statues and things like that, it's a violation of criminal law, so those need to be addressed in a separate issue, in a different forum. But again, I think we still have to have an honest conversation as to why those issues are happening. Not to say that they won't get prosecuted, but at the same time, that dialogue needs to be there so that, at least as a prosecutor, we're having the input from everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Ebel. Mr. Abbey.
I think some of it's already occurring in our community. There's outreach programs between law enforcement and our community, Coffee with the Cop, the Fish with the Cop. I think that promotes some community awareness, and it gets the law enforcement out interacting with the community in the way that they don't usually do in enforcement actions. So I agree those sorts of things can continue, and I agree that we should promote the peaceful protests, allow people to exercise their First Amendment rights, but also have a law enforcement side of it where they're keeping the peace, they're not engaging in violent or riot behaviors or destroying public properties. I'm also against the destruction of public statutes and memorials and that sort of thing, and those I also think should be prosecuted.
Thank you, Mr. Abbey. It's now time for Paul Kirkwood to ask a question.
There's been talk about funding a new jail due to the overcrowding in our current one. What are your opinions on the needs of a new jail for this community?
Mr. Abbey starts this time.
Thank you. I think that adding capacity to the jail is something we need to do. This community is spending entirely way too much money on housing people in out-of-county jurisdictions, tens and maybe hundreds of miles away, which is an expense to house them there. It's an expense to transport them back and forth to court here in Saline County. And so I think we do need to expand the jail. I don't think we can prevent people from committing crimes or all crimes, and so a jail is necessary to keep those people, especially the violent criminals, out of society so they're no longer able to do harm here. And without the jail capacity to do that, we're all going to have to worry about them being released back into our community and not being safe.
And now Mr. Ebel, please.
As a former corrections officer, I could say I spent a lot of time inside the Saline County Jail, but I guess for the good reason. I was working there. I will say this, at this point in time, I do believe that the current jail is getting antiquated, and I would be in favor of supporting building a new jail at this point in time. Crime numbers don't lie. Crime's on the increase. We have more people in jail than ever. I do agree that transporting and housing people out of county is adding more to our budget than what needs to be. If that means having a bigger jail to accommodate some of those folks that need to be locked up, that probably be the cost that we would have to do at this point in time. Overall, I do think that the crime numbers, I like to see them go down. I like to see less people in custody, but again, some of those things are out of our control, and we can only do what we can do. And so I am in favor, though, of building a new jail.
Thank you. Mr. Andrews, again, from the Salina Journal.
Illegal drug usage, it has been a problem throughout Saline County and the state and the nation. How would you go about reducing the amount of illegal drug activity in our county?
I'm sorry, can you re-say the first part of that question?
Illegal drug usage has and has continued to be a problem throughout Saline County and the state and the nation. How would you go about reducing the amount of illegal drug activity in our county?
Mr. Ebel,
Okay,
yes.
just make sure
It is
it
your
was
turn.
coming to me. It's kind of a two-part question. One, again, as the county attorney, we don't make the law. You know, we can only enforce what the law is in place at the time. With that being said, though, we're also given discretion as prosecutors. And so the question, I think, becomes one of, is there a substance abuse problem in our community? Absolutely, 100% there is. Is locking them up the best way to handle that? I'm going to argue that it's not. While that's appropriate in some cases, obviously I don't want to see kids out there getting sold drugs on the school ground. I don't want to see people out selling massive quantities of drugs and things like that. However, do we need to be locking people up in jail for extended periods of time for having a little bit of methamphetamine or a little bit of marijuana? I think our community and its resources and time is better served by looking at other routes as far as drug treatment, supervision, probation, and those type of things. And so in that regard, yes, it's an issue, but it's one I think with a focus and discretion we can reduce.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ebel. Mr. Abbey, please.
The substance abuse issue in Saline County is, in my belief, is attributable to the drug distribution problem in Saline County. Our office doesn't focus much on misdemeanor marijuana, those simple possession cases. That's mostly a city issue now that they have an ordinance. And so what we can do as county attorneys are making sure that the addicts, the people that are truly addicts, get the substance abuse help they need, That can come through pretrial intervention. It can come through post-conviction. The state provides funding for certain felony convictions to get drug treatment. And then on the other end, like I said, with distribution, those that are selling and distributing meth and drugs in our community need to be punished more severely and harshly and consistently, I think, to keep them out of our community and keep them from selling in the future and provide a deterrent from this enterprise of making money of selling drugs in our community.
Thank you, Mr. Abbey. We return to Salina Media Connection, Mr. Kirkwood, for the next question.
I wanted to talk a little bit about combating recidivism, and you mentioned that the number of inmates are way higher. We have apparently more offenders for certain crimes than others. How much, you mentioned your discretion as a prosecutor. In what ways can you demonstrate that, or in what ways can you use that discretion in order to, for example, instead of jailing an inmate, encourage certain social avenues of rehabilitation to funnel them back to being productive members in society instead of a drain on taxpayer resources and just throwing them in jail? And can you point to maybe your knowledge base or your past experience where you've handled a situation like that?
Mr. Abbey, I believe, is first.
Prosecutorial discretion, I think there's a misconception that our prisons and jails are full of people who are just charged with simple possession crimes. That's pretty unusual. I think the statistics show that Saline County is one of the counties that gives probation to people who should otherwise go to prison on drug crimes more than other counties. And so that's one step. We're saving some money, putting them on probation, give them a chance at treatment, and that step first before they go to prison. The other kind of limitation I see on reducing recidivism and going back through the jail and prison is a lot of the crime in Saline County is attributable to substance abuse, whether it's theft and burglaries and forgeries and that sort of thing. And those, when you get into that, you start getting into victims of crime, real people who want to see those cases prosecuted. And so it's my position as a prosecutor that I have an obligation to promote those victims' interests and prosecute those crimes as well.
Thank you. And Mr. Ebel.
I agree with that as well, as far as if there's victims of actual crime that are out monetary loss or out physical violence or harm, obviously those cases need to be prosecuted differently than what you indicate, maybe just simple drug possession charges and things like that. I think the recidivism in this county, a lot of it is attributable to substance abuse issues. We see it all the time because I've been practicing law for 17 years, and I think Mr. Abbey would agree that almost every case we see coming through is that someone's addicted to a drug or alcohol. And at that point in time, the biggest issue is how do we get those people on probation or get them into a drug treatment program to where they can learn the tools to cope in our society? What things can we do to offer them success? How can we get them jobs? How we can get them transportation to and from to make them productive members of society? Until that underlying issue is firmly addressed by the legislature, I don't think we're going to have much of a chance of reducing the recidivism rate other than, trying to work with them as best we can through the court system.
Thank you, Mr. Ebel. Next question, I believe, will be our last question. We'll return to Aaron Anders of the Salina Journal.
How can you ensure all people are treated equally during their interactions with law enforcement officers?
Well, that's a goal that we should all strive for, and hope for out of our law enforcement officers. Obviously, as the county attorney, if we would see any kind of systematic oppression as far as, certain officers who are treating people of color or any other type of people a certain way, that needs to be brought up and addressed through their supervisors and that situation taken control of right away. I don't believe that is a problem in our community, thankfully. I think our officers are here in our town are very fair, very just in what they do. I think they strive to be excellent in all they do. I think what Chief Nelson did and said during the George Floyd thing, I guess, protest right after it happened. I mean, he came out and made some statements that he'd be walking down the streets with people. And I think that's what needs to be encouraged. I think that's the goal of all our officers to be looking at. And again, there would be an issue that needs to be addressed and brought to the attention.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Abbey.
Sure. In my experience too now, in over 8 years about here in Saline County, we don't have this issue either. We have several hundred to over 1,000 criminal cases a year going through the county attorney's office. It's rare to even get an allegation of this racial-based policing there. I would say less than 5 a year of accusations even. That's how rare it is. And so, but ways that it's counteracted, I think that law enforcement has their own certification processes, C-posts that can police that if there's police officers that they believe are race-based policing. The Attorney General's office gets a report every year from every law enforcement agency about allegations of race-based policing. There's a suppression remedy through the courts that, and this is the allegation I'm talking about. Defendants can file a motion and say I was targeted because of my race, and the court has a hearing. If the court finds it, then they suppress the evidence. And that hasn't happened to my knowledge here in my years here. And so I just don't see it, it's an issue here. And I think,
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. We're now going to switch to questions from the audience, and Ann Zimmerman will take over that, reading and coordinating those questions and answers.
Thank you, Abner. I have several, and I don't know if you've had more come in since the one batch came up to me earlier, but you can bring them up if there are more. The first question, let's see, who started that last one? Is that?
Mr. Ebel.
You did. Okay, so Mr. Abbey will start on this one. Being an avid prosecutor and advocate for victims is a huge responsibility of serving as county attorney. Please tell us the highest level of felony you have prosecuted, how many jury trials you prosecuted, and the length of your longest trial, and how many cases you have argued to the Supreme Court on behalf of victims and citizens of Saline County.
Okay. Try and get it all in a minute. 3 cases to the Kansas Supreme Court, other cases to the Kansas Court of Appeals. My highest level of jury trial is first-degree murder, those highest offenses in Kansas. I've done 2 of those, by the way, and other lesser levels of homicide. And since 2014, that's been the majority of my practice here in the Saline County Attorney's Office, is those upper and higher level felonies. Total number of jury trials, I got a printout of all the jury trials and started going through them. My busiest time was I did 5 jury trials in 3 weeks one time, but usually over 10 a year, and so I would say dozens, maybe 100 jury trials, maybe. It's an estimation.
Thank you, Mr. Ebel.
As far as my jury trial experience, I would say my number's probably about the same. It's probably up towards about 100 jury trials. I know I had 1 week in particular when I was at the county attorney's office where I had 3 jury trials all in 1 week. So that was quite stressful. As far as Kansas appellate court arguments, again, I can't put a number on that. It's been several times, several appellate briefs I have written. As far as prosecution of crimes, I have prosecuted a wide variety of crimes. I have defended now as a defense attorney level 1 severity offenses. I had a client down in McPherson County who was charged with a level 1 offense and was successful in obtaining a verdict favorable to him, I guess I'll say. And so just 17 years as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney, I have numerous cases and experience under my belt.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Mr. Ebel. This is from a young person in Salina, a new voter. He said that people in the nation's jails and prisons are at a much higher risk of contracting and dying from COVID-19. The pandemic has further revealed the injustices of the current system of mass incarceration of people of color. As a county attorney, will you work to reduce the total number of people held in the Saline County Jail? If so, how? And if not, why not?
I'm not going to actively seek to reduce the number of people sitting in the Saline County Jail. Obviously, a lot of those people are there for a particular reason. Again, justice is something that needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. That's the definition of justice. every case is different, every case is unique. We have to look at all the facts, circumstances, and all the people involved in every particular kind of case to make a decision as to what's just for that case. I understand that there's arguments that people of color are being not being treated fairly, and are incarcerated at a higher rate. But again, I don't see that here in our county jail. Again, I don't think our officers or any of our prosecutors or anyone involved in the current judicial system has made that a case. And so I would say, while that might be applicable to other places in the country, it's not applicable here.
Thank you, Mr. Abbey.
Thank you. I too, as a prosecutor, prosecutors aren't the police officers out on the street looking for crime. We kind of take what comes to us. And so people who want to reduce the population of the jail, the next question is, who do you let out? There's some violent offenders in there, clearly, severe violent offenders, drug dealers, those ones that are causing additional problems in our community. And so I'm not in favor of reducing the jail population without some sort of risk assessment. And the way that's working now is there's a pretrial program done by Community Corrections where everyone's interviewed, they're given a score, a bond recommendation by Community Corrections. Sometimes it's an OR, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's a dollar amount the judge sets. But I think the important part of it is to know is that prosecutors aren't the only ones in that process saying you get to stay in jail and you get out. It's a risk assessment. It's really an assessment of likely to return to court and danger to the community. And those ones that are a danger or unlikely to return get a higher bond.
Thank you. Here's another question from a young person. 3 out of, let's see, this will be Mr. Abbey to start. 3 out of every 5 people in jails across the United States have not been convicted of a crime. They are being held pre-trial on cash bail, which they are unable to pay, and many on low-level nonviolent offenses. What is your position on the system of cash bail? As county attorney, will you reduce the use of cash bail?
I think it's working the way it is now with pretrial, I guess is my answer. The people who are determined to be low risk get let out, and the people who don't. If you have a cash bond, it's because you've been determined to be a higher risk to the community, or you've been determined that you have a high likelihood or a higher likelihood that you're not going to return to court, and that's the function of bond and bail. The other thing is we have a speedy trial time, and so all the people that are perhaps let out and not coming back are clogging up our court system with the people who are continually appearing and participating in their system. And if you continue to let that happen so much that they're clogging up the system that much, it's going to be a fight to get court time and trial time to give everyone a fair trial, victims and defendants alike.
Thank you. Mr. Ebel?
I think the answer to that question lies in what we're trying to do right now with the pretrial supervision program. The problem is this: we have the low-level offenders who are getting let out on bond, but the problem is they still don't show up for their next court hearing. So then what do you do? It becomes the question: do you arrest them again and have them brought back in and held in custody until their next court appearance? Or do you let them back out again, hope they make it to the next one? It's an ongoing problem, and it's a real problem. I do believe that some situations our cash bond system here is a little high. I would do a lot of work down in other counties, and their bonds are considerably lower than Saline County bonds. And their appearance rate, I would say, is pretty much on par with what Saline County is. And so, on my firsthand experience, I don't think we would necessarily be having less people show up for court. However, I think we could probably reduce the cash bond system to make it more affordable so people can get out.
Thank you. We have very little time left. One, maybe two, but probably only one question. This one says that as a county attorney, you would have enormous influence regarding who goes to trial and who ends up in jail. And one option is the diversion option, and there's evidence that Saline County historically underutilizes diversion, placing us on significantly lower than the state average. How would you use the diversion options?
I believe that diversion can be a great tool with the right candidate and with the right person. Obviously, you're not going to offer diversion to repeat offenders, someone who has never learned their lesson. You want to use diversion for first-time offenders, or maybe even a second-time offender if the prior offense was a long time ago. I think our current diversion policy is too strict here in Saline County. Again, with my practice taking me into a lot of other counties, McPherson and Dixon County and Ellsworth and Rice counties, their diversion policies seem to be a little bit more, I don't want to say lenient, but easier to work with. And it gives people who maybe deserve a chance to work the diversion. Again, plus, the terms of the diversion most of the time are the same terms that are going to happen to a person if they're convicted and they're placed on probation. Most of the time, as part of that diversion, they have to undergo drug treatment, pay fines, costs, and why not give them the added benefit of trying to have their case dismissed before it would actually go to a trial?
Thank you. Mr. Abbott.
Yep. The current diversion policy in the county attorney's office, some things within it are limited by statutes. For instance, you can't have more than one diversion for DUI in your lifetime. Diversions on domestic batteries are limited, those sorts of things. And the county attorney's policy is consistent with that. Other restrictions or prohibitions on diversion are serious violent felonies. If you interfere or obstruct the police, those sorts of things, depending on what the victim wants, whether you can get a diversion or not. I think all of those are appropriate case-by-case determinations. And the other thing about it is on our complaints, every complaint that's filed now, it has a diversion notification that says our office has a diversion policy. Here's how you can access it to see if you qualify. So right up front, our office is very open about making the diversion policy open to people to inspect to see if they qualify, if that's something they're interested in, and see and if not, then they don't. But and then the other thing is capacity. Diversions have to be supervised, and we have an investigator in our office who supervises the diversions, and if you expand it, you're going to need more resources.
One more question then, Mr. Abbey. How would you exercise your prosecutorial discretion in order for mentally ill addicts to receive treatment before jail time?
Mentally ill addicts, did I hear you?
Addicts, yeah, sorry.
There's interesting things going on with the state legislature on funding that. There's the ideas of veterans courts that are, a lot of them are the people we see with mental illness, and then the drug court we have now. A lot of the people in there have a dual diagnosis, a mental illness as well as a drug issue. And when those two come into play, it's harder to combat both of them. It's harder to solve the mental health issue and the drug issue. And so the drug program, I support it, helps. It's kind of one of the limited resources we do have within the court system to help with mental health. We also frequently, as conditions of probation, again, all the people who get probation have a screen, and if the probation screener determines that mental health is an issue, they're ordered to get a mental health intake and assessment, and then the probation officer can determine or follow up and make sure whether they're complying with that and getting the mental health they need as part of probation, again, keeping them out of jail.
Thank you. Mr. Ebel.
Could I have you repeat the question to me?
Yes, how would you exercise your prosecutorial discretion in order for mentally ill addicts to receive treatment before jail time?
Before jail time, okay. Well, again, I think a lot of that goes back to the last question we were talking about, having possibly a diversion program available. If it's a client or a defendant who has known criminal mental health issues that are documented, maybe running them through the court system is not the best course of action. Maybe getting early on it and having them obtain the mental health therapy, mental health treatment, drug treatment up front is the way to go. And that's something to consider, and something to keep open and to look at. Again, post-conviction, at that point in time, a lot of it, again, is dictated by the current statute. The criminal history places them in the appropriate grid box where they, based on their criminal history, most likely they're going to receive probation in this jurisdiction. They're going to receive drug court and all the resources that come along with that, along with the mental health evaluations and the orders to follow through with all those kind of therapies.
Thank you, thank you. I think we have run out of time for questions. At this point, we'll have 1 minute each for the candidate to make closing remarks, and Mr. Ebel goes first on that also.
I want to thank the Salina League of Women Voters and all the participants for hosting this event. I want to thank everyone who has taken the time to watch this. As I stated earlier, Saline County is my home. It's why I decided I wanted to run for Saline County Attorney. I want to give back and serve my fellow citizens. I believe that with my prior experience, knowledge, education, that I am the ideal candidate to lead the county attorney's office going forward. I believe that the search for truth and justice is paramount to the county attorney and what their goal and objectives are. I believe that I am that candidate that has the experience. I've been practicing law for 17 years, almost twice as long as my opponent. I believe, again, that I am the best candidate. My name is Jeff Ebel, and I'm asking for your vote on August the 4th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ebel, and Mr. Abbey, finish off today.
Mr. Perney, my closing will kind of be a continuation or finishing of my opening, but I've been doing this for about 10 years as a prosecutor the entire time, starting from law school to being Sherman County attorney, and then having Ellen Mitchell hire me as assistant county attorney until now. I still work in the Saline County attorney's office right next door. I came over here from work this evening. During my time, I've prosecuted the highest level of felonies, and I believe that, and having my experience in that office for this long and doing that sort of thing, I'm the best one to lead that office. I can tell you that of 3 prosecutors that have worked in that office, with years with myself and years with Mr. Ebel, Ellen Mitchell, the county attorney, now endorses me. Christina Trocheck, the city attorney, endorses me. Amy Norton, who's leaving our office to work in the Attorney General's office as of Friday, endorses me. And as of yesterday, the Saline County Sheriff's Office's Fraternal Order of Police endorses me as well.
Thank you. Thank you to the candidates for coming for the forum tonight. We're going to take a few minutes break, about 7 or 8 minutes, and we're going to sanitize the tables in honor of COVID-19 and prepare for the Saline County Commissioner District 3 candidates coming up. And we want to remind everybody to vote on or before August 4th.